Hello world. I had that video, it might have even been like 2 weeks back. It's been a while. And I attempted to go through the Rhode Island Health Code, or Food Code to be specific, and for some reason my internet kept crashing. And still doing that at home, which bothers the crap out of me. But enough of that. I had to do a really abbreviated version of going through the food code, proving that there is no rule against being barefoot in the restaurant. And so now, since I have the more reliable internet connection at school, I'm going to do it here. So you guys probably recall, if you've seen my other videos, that I was kicked out of Walmart recently for not having shoes on. And I went up the hierarchy and went from person to person, showing them the signed letter I got from barefooters.org, and they all still insisted that it was a law, but they sort of were intrigued at the document, so passed me up to the next level of the food chain there. Anyway, so I got up to assistant manager there. They told me that there's still hope for being barefoot in the store, but she still believes that it's a health regulation, and the manager would be the only one to, override that. So there's hope even if it was a health code, which is not. So here I have the Rhode Island Food Code. It's like 180 pages, which is really long. But I was able to skip over parts of it, specifically parts like poisonous or toxic materials, water, plumbing and waste, equipment, utensils, and linens, stuff that doesn't really apply. But I read through sections like purpose and definition, so I can get an idea of what they mean by when they use all these words. That's kind of important to read. Management and personnel, to see if there are any regulations put forth by the government requiring people to wear shoes that are part of the management of personnel, or if their responsibilities cover keeping people without shoes out. Chapter 3 would probably be the most important, food, because everyone says it's a food risk, and because there's food in here, you can't be barefoot, which is ridiculous. And then Chapter 6, physical facilities. Again, that's kind of like, in the store, this should happen, that should happen. And then Chapter 8, compliance and enforcement. So I'm going to go through little sections of those chapters showing you what I found. So first we're going to go to Chapter 2, which is management and personnel, because I don't really need to go through the definitions with you guys, because they're pretty straightforward. So supervision, 2-1. You have to have knowledge, responsibility, knowledge, and duties. That's 2-101, 2-102, and 2-103. So for, let's see. Oh, this is the table of contents. That's why. Let's go to the actual chapter, shall we? I was wondering why it was so small. Yeah, that was the table of contents. So when I go to the actual chapter, I'll be able to read this a little better for you. Okay, here's Chapter 2, almost. Okay, management and personnel. So we have supervision, employee health, personal cleanliness, and hygienic practices. So the responsibility of the person in charge, as it says, does not mention anywhere that you need to keep people out that don't have shoes on. I think that in the knowledge, based on the risks of foodborne illness and inherited food operation during the inspections upon request, blah, 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 blah. It says, you're supposed to be knowledgeable about these things that can happen. Nowhere in there does it mention no shoes. Well, that's interesting. You'd think that in the responsibilities of the person who's in charge, they would probably say, hey, make sure they're wearing shoes because it's against the health code. Anyway, and then it has their responsibilities outlined here, which goes through things like describing the relationship between prevention of foodborne illness and blah, 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 blah. Describing diseases that are transmittable through food, blah, 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 explaining the significance of the relationship, blah, blah. So just like general, prevention stuff. And it doesn't mention shoes. So that's interesting. I go down the list here. The duties of the person in charge. Nowhere in there does it mention shoes. Feel free to, if you guys want to see this for yourself, I suggest you go through the round or whatever state you are in Department of Health website and print it out. I wouldn't recommend you print it unless you read better through a printer and don't care about wasting like 200 pages. So, personal preference there, but I strongly suggest you at least skim it a little bit. So, we have, okay, well 2-2 is about employee health, but it mainly covers illnesses and stuff. Here it mentions in 2-3 personal cleanliness of employees. Obviously talked about washing hands, hair nets, no jewelry on your hands, so I couldn't work there. Nowhere does it mention shoes. It does mention a lot the food contact surfaces like counters, your hands, that sort of thing. Things that need to be kept clean. So unless you're dropping your food on the floor and then serving it to a customer, I don't think you need to worry about what's on the floor, like your shoes or the lack thereof. I don't think it really would matter. So it talks about hand sanitizers, when to wash your hands after doing one, blah, 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 blah. It talks about fingernails, because there's crap underneath everyone's fingernails, so keep those clear. It mentions jewelry, like I said earlier, you can't have jewelry. And then it mentions outer clothing, like, baggy stuff that you don't want dripping the food. It needs to be clean, obviously. But nowhere does it mention shoes. 2-4, food contamination prevention. You'd think that if anywhere, it would be in food contamination prevention. But no, it's not. Not even the employees seem to be deemed a food contamination risk if barefoot. So if bare feet were a risk, they would probably be in here, right? So, chapter 3, food, characteristic sources. It talks about how to prepare food, that sort of thing. But in 3-3, protection from contamination after receiving. So after the, as I interpret that, it's after the food comes to the place and then it's being prepared. So we're going to skip ahead to that. This is a fairly important chapter here, I would say, because it mentions food. Okay, so 3-3, protection from contamination after receiving. 3-301.11, preventing contamination by employees. Of course, it mentions hands, because that's what's touching the food. But nowhere does it mention shoes. Well, that's interesting, right? Continuing going through. Blah, blah, blah. Wait. Okay. I misinterpreted the order or something. Preventing contamination on the premises. Doesn't mention it. Same thing with consumers. Interesting. No, it's